Okay, Tom, you're very welcome to this interview.
Thanks very much,
at the start of this interview, we have put the relatives with the grandparent or whatever.
Yes.
So here today, some of your grandchildren. You have Abby, you have Clodagh, and you have, what's your name? Robert, that's right. And your daddy's name is? Kenny. And Kenny's daddy's name is? Grandad. What do you think of your granddad, Robert? Do you like him?
Yes.
What do you like about him?
I like feeding the dogs with him.
Feeding the dogs, good man. What about you, Abby? Do you like your granddad? We know you do. What is it that you like most about him?
He's kind to me.
How is he kind to you?
He helps me sometimes
Yeah.
with stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Clodagh, what's your favourite thing about your granddad?
He collects me from school.
He collects you from school. Is he good fun?
Yeah.
Does he like to sing? Do you ever hear him singing? What?
I don't know.
No? He doesn't like singing? No.
My name is Thomas Ryan and I was born on the 11th of the 2nd, 1942,
1942.
unfortunately.
Oh, why would you say that?
It's because it's so long ago.
So- I thought you were going to talk about the war coming and that kind of stuff.
No.
1942.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I know a little bit about you. I know you grew up in the Glen of Aherlow and you moved to Clonoulty. Just tell us a little bit about life as a young person. You moved when you were 17. So tell us a little bit about growing up as a young person.
Well, sure, I suppose when I look back on it, I had a great youth. And I came from a great home and great neighbours. And I can't let this interview go without mentioning Tommy's grandmother. Because we had a farm beside Tommy's grandmother, who was Cathy Bryan. And anything we wanted that we were short of when we go over to the outside farm, go up to Cathy Bryan. And we always got well treated and we always got bread and jam and tea and everything else we wanted. My mother and father, I have to say, were terrific parents and we had a great time really.
Would you say that was rare, Tom, that your parents were as kind as yours were?
Well, at the time, and looking back, and if you don't mind me, I'm talking to two teachers here now.
Yeah.
Teachers at the time were very hard. And I haven't said that again. I had a free run.
Okay.
Because I never had a bad teacher. I never had a teacher that wasn't nice to me.
You never got a clout?
Well, I very seldom now. And I did see a lot of other people suffering. I don't know why, but that was kind of the thing that was done at the time.
Okay. What was your mother's maiden name and where was she from?
My mother's maiden name was Lee. Now my mother was born and reared in the Glen of Aherlow. Her father and mother were both teachers. One of them taught in Lisfernan village. Her father taught in Lisfernan village and her mother taught in Barna, which you would know of.
Yes, Barna.
Which would have been 6 miles up the road.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting to tell you that my grandmother went to school in a pony and trap every day for 42 years in all weathers. And that was she had to go 6 miles up to Barna and 6 miles home again in the evening.
Okay. And Tom, growing up, were times hard? You were from a farm, were you?
I was from a farm, but do you know something, looking back on it, we didn't find it that hard, even though we worked hard. And there was a lot of hard work to be done, and everything was done manually.
Okay.
There was no tractors, no nothing when I was young.
You were reared under the Galties.
I was.
Did you use the Galties for your fun and sport?
Absolutely. We were big into climbing mountains and going up to the lakes. And I was very lucky to have friends up there who were big into fishing and things. And we used to go up to the lakes there.
Yeah.
Philly Allen there and Bertie Gibbons and Pan Noonan and the Wilkinsons and
the Cagneys.
And the Cagneys and all those. They were marvellous people for providing sport, both shooting and fishing. And
that's something you kept all your life, that love of nature and hunting and
I still go up there on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay. How have things changed, Tom, over the years here? How would you see much change here in this parish over the years?
Well, I suppose from a children's point of view, there's an immense change. Children are so happy going to school now, and I think that's a huge thing. Like even it was only the other day I was talking to a man over on the Ballock Road there, and he was telling me about his brother coming to school here. But I suppose I have to be careful here too. And he told me the way he suffered. He used to cry going to school.
Right.
He used to absolutely cry going to school. And I think that's the biggest change and the best change. That teachers nowadays, I think they're wonderful people, and they have a different attitude altogether, and probably different training, and you know. But kids love going to school now, and I think that is a huge plus.
Okay, that's a good change. Is there any change for the worst around that you see? Is there something that might have been better back along?
Well, I suppose a lot of children now, I think, and a lot of people would agree with me, they're not getting enough exercise. They're being driven here and driven there and driven everywhere. And I think when you look at our GA club at the moment, with all the injuries we have, you have to ask yourself, what are we doing wrong? And I have a feeling it's going back to the basics. When you were, from 5 years on, you were walking every day or cycling every day, and you built up all the muscles. I played every sort of a game in my lifetime, and I played until I was 43 or 4, and I never had a major injury.
Okay. Tom, food. What kind of food would you have grown up with?
Well, the food we had at home was completely natural food that came from the farm. 80% of the food we had at home. We provided all our own vegetables, potatoes, meat, milk, and what was bought basically was tea, sugar and flour maybe, and that was about it.
Okay, a healthy diet?
Without a doubt, a healthy diet.
Okay.
But I have to say, my mother was a tremendous cook.
Okay.
She was a fabulous cook, and anything you'd bring her in, like when we were in our shooting days or hunting with the greyhound for the rabbits or anything you'd bring her in, she was a brilliant cook.
She turned it out well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you any stories, Tom, that your parents, grandparents, older people that you knew right through your life would have told you? Any old stories, any folklore stories?
Well, I suppose I heard a good few stories about the troubled times, and I suppose one of the biggest stories I heard from my mother's side was when they blew up the bridge in there at the bottom of Lisbonne. That bridge was blown up, and that was the way she used to go up to school with her pony and trap, with the result that she had to go back around the other way, down and up by your house, up to Munabola and back the high road as they used to call it. And my father told me a story about the ambush in Lisnagal.
Lisnagal now is between Coach Road in Aherlow and Bancha.
Yes, and some of the boys that were involved in that, they stayed on our premises before the ambush, because we were living at the other side of the river from Lisnagal, and they went up across the river for the ambush. But one of the boys, he was cleaning his gun, or he went to clean his gun, and it went off, and he shot him in the leg. And my father had to take him into town in a horse and common car to get him treated by a doctor. And I think, there was terrible stories at that time of hardship and all sorts of cruelty and murder and everything. That I heard a lot of those stories.
Thames wouldn't be remembered favourably.
Absolutely not. No.
And yet, Tom, you said earlier that your house was non-political.
Non-political.
Do you think it was that way for a reason?
Yeah, I think myself that there was an awful lot of bitterness. The bitterness even is there to this day.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we were reared to not to be bitter towards anybody. That's the way my mother and father reared us, and I often thank them for that, because I never judged a person by what politics they were or anything like that. I just took them at face value, and I didn't care what politics they were.
Yeah, and that's my experience of you too. You don't make any judgments on people. Any other stories of the Fianna or Phil McCool or Pishogues, Tom, or fairies? Or
well, the big story, of course, one of the mountains in the Glen of Ireland was called Schlieben na Mug, or Schlieben na Wick. Would that be the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, you're grand, yeah.
I'm talking to an Irish teacher, so I better be careful.
Well, notice I'm not correcting you.
And there was a sow. Now, it wasn't a boar, now, it was a sow, which is a female pig. And she was causing havoc up in the Glen of Ireland. She'd be a wild pig.
Yeah.
And the story, she was ruining all the gardens and the vegetables and everything. And so Phil McCool came down and he killed the sow. That is one of the stories.
That's the legend.
And that's how the mountain got its name.
Schlieben na Mug. Yeah. And what about Pishogi stuff, Tom? Would you ever? I mean, other people who we've interviewed today now spoke about eggs being put into gardens or
Yes.
into the sugar beet pile or
Yes.
stuff like that to kind of as a wish of evil on a person, or we spoke about holy water on the four corners of your house in your
Oh, absolutely.
farm.
Holy water, yeah.
Have you got any Pishog stories or any stories of
Well,
fairies?
I
or-
would have heard a lot of Pishog stories, but I never experienced Pishogs
Yeah.
myself.
Can you recall any story?
Well, one of the things was that they said that certain people could set Pishogs and they would take the cream off of the milk.
Yes.
That was a common story now, but I never experienced that
Yeah.
firsthand. And the other thing about the holy water, I mean, that was a huge thing. Every house that time had holy water, and they blessed all the cattle, and they blessed the land, and they blessed the crops, and they blessed the house, and they blessed everything.
Tom, I know your son, your sons, all your sons, all your family love music. It's a big part. Derek would be, I suppose, the best known of them from musical wise and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you remembering back, do you remember where you would have got your love of music?
Well, I tell you now, it was extraordinary, really, because we were very privileged in the sense that we all learned music when we were small. And I went into Tipperary town in a pony and trap to learn music when I was from about 6 or 7 on.
Okay.
And I learned music all the way up to my intercert. But our love of music came from our parents. My aunt, who was my father's sister, was a regular visitor to our house.
What was her name?
Her name was Mary.
Mary.
She would have been Mary Ryan. She also sang some of the songs from the operettas.
Okay.
And another very interesting thing about my musical background is when we were ever so small, we had cousins that were going to school in Rockwell, the Gallaghers.
Yes.
They were going to school in Rockwell. Now, Christopher Gallagher, who would be my first cousin, was a brilliant musician, brilliant singer, pianist, brilliant flute player. And when he was in Rockwell, I would have been only maybe 6 or 7. And we were taken in the pony and trap from our place over to Rockwell to see all the shows they did.
And Christopher would have been involved in the shows.
And I would have seen all the Gilbert and Sullivan shows in Rockwell when I was that age, which was most extraordinary when you look back at it.
Sure, no wonder it rubbed off on you and the generations after you.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom, you moved at 17 from the Glenabarlow to Ballymore. Will you talk about that? That was land commission stuff, was it?
That was correct.
Okay.
My father had 3 farms in Aherlow, as you know.
Yes.
He had a farm in Rossbog, where we lived, and he had a farm in Mullabula, which your brother owns now.
Yes.
And he also had a farm in Ballacrahan from Roberts Cross up to Reardon's,
Yes.
down to the river.
Yes.
He wanted the 3 farms. Now, at that time,
That would be a big. That's a lot of land. That's a big.
it's a lot. He had a lot of land,
Yeah.
but very scattered.
Yes.
And it was a drag. In those days, it was all horse and car and horse and, going back and over the road, and there was an awful lot of time wasted. And they decided at some stage, if they got a farm together, that they would give up the land they had and move.
Right.
So they got the opportunity of getting this farm here. But in the process, actually, he lost land because I think he lost 14 acres altogether.
So the amount of acreage was 14 more in Aherlow. It's total acreage, right?
The quality of land wouldn't be anything like the quality
Of land
no.
here. So he scored that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember moving from the Glen?
Oh, I certainly do.
What was that like
Oh, I'll tell you something.
at 17?
It was terrible.
Yeah.
It has left a mark
Has it?
all my life.
Yeah.
But having said that, I'm living in possibly one of the best parishes in Ireland. I have no doubt about that.
I have to agree.
Fantastic people in this parish.
And you've also maintained your links with the Aherlow people.
Oh, very much so. And I'm a regular visitor back
Yes,
there. My
sir.
sister still lives there. And I have a number of friends that I visit on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So you moved to Bally. In a couple of, just give a summary of the history of Ballymore House.
The history of Ballymore House is that there was a castle in Ballymore where Connors are living now. You had some of their Connors here in your own school.
Yes.
John O'Connor and his wife Rita are living in Ballymore Castle, which was the home of the Murphys. Now, if you go across the road here to the church, across from the school here, and go up in the organ gallery and read the inscription on the 3 huge stained glass windows, you will see they were given by Murphys from Ballymore Castle.
Okay.
Now, they built a house for their son, that's the house I'm living in.
Okay.
And our house was built around 1930, or 1830, sorry.
1830, right.
1830.
Do you remember being impressed with Ballymore House when you arrived as a 17-year-old?
Oh, very much, yeah.
Yeah. It would have been a bigger house than what you had in
Absolutely,
Arno.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's a lovely house to live in.
Yeah.
And a great place to rear children.
Any ghost stories? Usually with old houses, there's any ghost stories going on in
Any amount of
Ballymore?
ghost stories around Ballymore. And when we got the farm here, there was a man living down here in Ballycamas. His name was Michael Crotty. Now, a funny thing, Michael Crotty actually moved from Ballycamas and went up to the Glen of Aberlour.
Oh, he moved the other way.
And he lived on the Boreen up from the Caravansary, up where Peters lived long ago.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Michael Crotty met my father in town when he heard he was moving to Ballymore. And he said, God, he said, I'm sorry for your trouble, he said. And my father said, what? Why? He said, oh, he said, the place you're going to is completely haunted, he said.
Okay.
Now, there was another old man, well, he was old when I knew him, Jack Hayes. Now, Jack was one of the marvellous characters up our way.
As in Ballymore?
In Ballymore.
Yeah.
And Jack used to come up to our front gate and sit on the ditch opposite the road on a summer's evening. He could sit there for 2 hours or 3 hours looking at the entrance. He always maintained it was haunted and he was waiting to see something. He said they used to never be able to keep the gate closed one time or opened, and was it opened or closed? No, closed. They used to be never able to keep the gate closed, that it would always open, and it would open of its own accord. And
okay.
He was waiting for this to happen,
right.
But I don't think he ever saw it.
Right, you don't know what that was connected to, or what, kind of a fairy thing, or a showy thing, or...
I don't. It was possibly somebody hiding behind a ditch some night and somebody passing and made some noise or something.
Yeah. Tom, I was down at your house one day and I think you pointed out an elm tree to me.
Yes.
And rare enough given the effect Dutch elm disease has had on trees in the country.
Well, like you said earlier on there, I'm very fond of walking through the countryside with my dogs and that. And I don't think there is another tree that I know of, any place I walk, an elm tree as old as the elm tree that's grown up on the side of that passage. I would say it has to be 80 years old anyway, at least.
Okay.
And Father Fogarty, the Lord of Mercy, the former parish priest here, was coming up one day, and I have a pillar, I have a steel pillar holding up this tree.
Yeah.
And he said, what the hell have you that pillar holding up that tree for? So I was explaining to him that, as far as I know, that's the only elm tree around, I said, and I didn't want it to fall.
You'll do everything to keep it.
Yeah.
To keep it alive. Okay.
I love trees.
Yeah. Okay. Any local traditions, Tom, or anything around Clonoulty, Rossmore, or Ballymore? Any local traditions or anything out of the ordinary?
No, not really. But I would like to tell you about a man who lived at the end of our passage here, Ned Connolly.
Ned Connolly, right.
Ned Connolly, when we came here, was a tonic. He really saved us. he was a delight to meet. He was an extraordinary man, even though he was well over 80 at the time I knew him now. But he fought in the Boer War.
The Boer War.
Yes,
right.
He was in the British Army minding the horses. He loved horses, and he worked with horses all his life. And he came to Ballymore to mind the horses for the Maher family, who preceded the Murphy family in Ballymore,
right.
Before our time.
Yes.
And he had a pile of memorabilia. I don't know what happened to it. He had shells, big shells, huge shells that came out of huge guns, and he had smaller shells, and he had imitation guns, and he had a whole pile of stuff. And he used to be always talking about the Boer War.
Okay. And you used to remember the stories and listening to him. Yeah. Okay. And Mockra was a big part of your life, Tom.
Yeah.
Mockra the Firma.
Mockra was a wonderful organisation for us when we were young, because we were reared completely different to the people that are in Mockra now. And why I say that is our culture was never a drink culture. You know, we never associated Mockra with drink or going to meetings with having any or anything like our socials or anything. And we didn't go an awful lot of places at that time. And Mockra was a great outlet for meeting people. And they had wonderful competitions and wonderful public speaking competitions and wonderful debating competitions and field days and crop competitions and cattle competitions and a whole pile of things. And it used to go on the whole year, and we had a great time in Mocha, and we were very lucky. There was a terrific Mocha Cup here always, and still is.
Yeah. So you got a lot from Mocha.
I got a lot from. I was privileged enough to be on a team that won public speaking in Ireland in the late 60s.
Okay. Tom, what I would know about you is the huge pride that you would have in your children and your grandchildren. I suppose some of the lads, we talk about Declan and he's hurling, I suppose, past now at this stage. I presume he'll be involved and will be involved again. But what was it like to have your son win in All Ireland? Captain Tipperary, for example, in 1989 was it to win an All Ireland above in
under 21?
Yeah. What was that like for you?
It was a great honour.
Yeah.
We enjoyed Declan's career immensely. We got an awful lot of pleasure out of it, and there was a lot of ups and downs in it.
Yeah.
But you forgot about the ups and downs. Really, you took the value out of it. We got great value out of it, and enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah.
And like all good things, it came to an end.
It came to an end. And winning a senior All Ireland, say in 89 and in 91.
Marvellous. And the one in 2001 was even better.
It was sweeter because it was all those years later.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had a marvellous career, really marvellous career.
Yeah. And you had a marvellous time following him as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Derek then with the singing is well known.
Yes. Derek wanted to be a singer, I'd say, from the day he was born.
Yeah.
And there was a lady now at the North Messon lived next door to us, Mrs. Shanahan, who was terrific to our children when they were young, and her children were friendly with our lads. But she told me she used to go out in the yard and sit down in a chair when Derek would be milking the cows in the milking parlour because he'd be singing and she'd be listening to him.
And Tom, we're coming to the end. Is there anything else of note that you said that you'd like to tell us for this recording? Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you'd like to say?
No, well, of course, I would just like to talk about the GA for a minute.
Yes,
if that's
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, a big part of your own. Here in the parish.
I was a lover of football, like all my life. I would have had that tradition from coming from Aherlow, and I had an uncle who was an exceptional footballer in his time. Played for Tipperary for many years and played for Munster, and. When I came over here, there was very little known about football, and we were lucky enough to put a good team together here, and we won county final in 1969, which was amazing. Now that was a junior county final, and in more recent years, in the middle 80s, we won a couple of football finals as well, both junior and intermediate. And having said that now about football, I have to say that I've come to love hurling above all else. I think it is a marvellous game, and there's a marvellous club here, and it has progressed so much over the years, and the facilities here are second to none.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there have been marvellous people running this club for as long as I remember, and I think that particularly the young children here, they're so lucky. If you go up to that field, even yesterday evening, if you go up to that field any evening, and you will see so many people over 8s, 10s, 12s, the whole way up along, and every one of those people, I think they're marvellous people, and there's an awful lot of work being done here, and there's an awful lot owed to GA.
Absolutely, and if you go up to that field, they're all enjoying themselves.
Absolutely.
It's not killing them or anything, they're all enjoying themselves. What do you remember fondly, and what was hard? What were the difficulties, and what were the things you
I had a lot of difficulties in my personal life, as you probably know. Like I was married to Declan's mother now, I would say.
Yes.
Who was Mary Butler.
Mary Butler.
Well, she'd be Paul's mother and Kenny's mother.
Yes.
I better mention them all.
Yeah.
Carol's mother and Ian's mother and Derek's mother.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Mary got cancer when she was quite young, at the age of 34 or 33 and a half. She got it at, and she was dead in a year and a half with cancer. And the year before that, one of our sons, Robert, died as well from cystic fibrosis.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a terrible hard time of my life.
Yeah.
But having said that, I have to pay tribute to all those people who really helped me, particularly Mary's mother, Mrs. Butler, who was a most fantastic woman and had a tough life herself in lots of ways, but she was an outstanding person and helped us no end.
Yeah. and your neighbours.
I'm sorry, you have to mention Mrs. Shanahan as well.
Yes.
The lady I mentioned already.
Yes.
Who was another exceptional woman, the kindest woman you could meet.
Helped you through difficult times.
Oh, and our kids helped him enormously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and that sounds like a very, very hard time.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you remember fondly?
What do I remember fondly? Well, I remember my youth very fondly.
Do you? Yeah.
Oh, I do.
You smile when you talk about hunting in the Galleries and
Absolutely.
fishing and.
Absolutely. I was lucky enough to fall in with a crowd of people who were way older than me, and they accepted me from a very early age, and I travelled miles and miles with them, and they were always very good to me and very nice to me, and I owe them a lot.
Yeah.
They gave me a love of nature and a love of everything like that.
Yeah. And you married a second time, Tom?
I did. I married Breda,
Yes.
who is a fantastic girl.
Yeah.
And took on an awful lot when she married me. Not I might say myself, but
You might, maybe this is the wrong term, but you had a second family
yes,
as well.
second family,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're all doing fine.
They're all doing fine.
Yeah, they
No,
are
doing
indeed.
well.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young person starting off now, given your experiences in your life? And this is my final question, Tom. What advice would you give to a young person?
Well, I would advise, first and foremost, I would advise people to have faith. You have to have faith to carry you through this life, in my opinion.
Are you talking about religious
Absolutely,
faith? Okay.
absolutely. And now, I'm not specifically talking about being a Catholic, even though I'm a staunch Catholic myself.
Yeah.
But you have to believe, I think, in a superior being to yourself. And you have to accept what comes your way as coming from a higher authority,
Okay.
if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That would be my philosophy. And if you can do that, you can go back to that person and you can draw great strength through difficult times.
Okay.
But I think people who try to go it alone and haven't any reserve of faith or deep belief, they must find it very difficult.
They don't have it to fall back on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And at the moment, there's an awful lot of hopelessness, as you know.
Yes.
And an awful lot of suicide and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's a lack of hope.
Yes.
But you can't lose hope. Hope is the only thing that carries you through this life.
Yeah.
And no matter how dark today is, you have to hope. And I know I've known dark days.
Yes.
You have to hope. There's a better day to come.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to believe.
Okay. Tom, thank you very much. I know your involvement here in the parish. I know your involvement in many ways, in GA, in music, in Mockra, in meeting people. You are remembered fondly in Aherlow. They'd always ask, how's Tom Ryan? And did you ever meet him and this kind of thing? And I suppose your influence is, I suppose, being passed on to the next generation of Ryans, and it's spreading out. So thank you very much for all that, and thanks a million, Tom, for doing this interview.
And thank you very much yourself.